Wow, I never realized how nice the sunset looks in the wasteland. It's almost as if nothing could ever go wrong. Hey everyone, I'm TCS23 and welcome back to Crossout Basics. If you haven't figured it out by now, the wasteland can be a pretty harsh and unforgiving place for all who dare to roam it. Surviving this toxic jungle means you have to play smart, stay determined, and be willing to use every advantage you have at your disposal. So in order to help you to be more successful, I'm going to share with you 10 tips and tricks for winning PvP battles. And just to make sure we're on the same page, the mode I'm talking about is located here on the world map. Even though these 3 game modes have different resource rewards, all of them are considered PvP missions. Okay, so let's get into it. The first tip is to learn the lay of the land. Currently, there are 16 maps to cycle through, each with their own style and format. Your understanding of each map and its features will directly affect your ability to navigate them properly and to determine what is the best course of action to take. Getting familiar with every map will take some time, but trust me, it's worth it. Tip number 2 is to get familiar with each of the 3 possible game modes within PvP missions. The first one is Domination Mode, which can be won either by destroying the other team within 5 minutes or capturing 2 out of 3 bases. If an enemy player moves into the same base you are trying to capture, no progress will be made until they leave or until you destroy them. Once a base is fully captured, it will remain that way even after you leave, but keep in mind that it can also be recaptured by the enemy team. The next game mode is called Assault. In this mode there are 2 bases. One is yours, and the other belongs to the enemy team. To win, you either have to defeat the enemy team within the time limit, or capture their base before they cap yours. The difference with capturing a base in this mode is that it has 3 individual segments. Once a segment is fully captured, it cannot be removed, even if an enemy player returns to their base. This provides the opportunity for some strategy. Depending on the circumstances, you don't necessarily have to capture the entire base to win. As long as you have more captured segments than the opposing team, then sometimes you can actually just hide or keep your distance and you'll win the match. The last game mode is called Encounter and is probably the most difficult mode to win by method of capture. The reason for this is that there is only one base, usually centrally located, and it requires capturing 3 segments to win the match. Oftentimes this mode is won by eliminating the other team before the time runs out, so my general recommendation is to focus on taking out the enemy team rather than capping the base. Moving on to tip number 3, you should get to know your opponents and teammates. The longer you play this game, the more you'll start to see familiar players show up in games. This is especially true in the higher power score rankings. Unless you have teamed up through a clan or a group, then chances are your teammates in one game will eventually become your opponents a few games later. Getting to know the player names, along with their builds and playstyle, will help you to take advantage of their strengths and weaknesses depending on which team they end up on. Tip number 4 is to understand the pros and cons of your own build. For instance, melee builds are not good for head-on attacks. They are much more effective when you attack an opponent from the side, or better yet, from behind. Using your build properly will make you a better player for your team and will give you a better chance of staying alive. Tip number 5 is to plan out your approach to each enemy. This really only takes a few seconds each time, but it can make a big difference in your survival rate.
A few moments later.
Tip number 6 is to focus fire on attacking bots first. Before a match starts, you can easily identify how many AI opponents there will be by looking at the team's list. Attacking bots tend to be the first enemies you come across, and if you can manage to destroy a few of them before they destroy your own bots, this usually will get you the win in the end. Tip number 7 is a follow-up to tip number 6, and that is to block your team's attacking bots for about 10 to 20 seconds before letting them go. This will result in the enemy bots being drawn more to your side of the map, which gives you a better chance of defeating them. This isn't a foolproof plan, but it has definitely worked for me on more than one occasion. Here's another bonus tip for you. If a bot is targeting you, an easy way to get them off your back is to use a cloaking module if you have one. Make sure to time your invisibility at the right moment. Otherwise, they may shoot and decloak you without skipping a beat. Tip number 8 is to use cover as often as possible. Leaving yourself exposed will often result in the enemy team focusing their fire on you. So as you move, always be aware of the closest cover and be ready to use it in a moment's notice. Tip number 9 is something I always talk about in a lot of my videos, and that is to use a radar or at least a radio on every build you use. My number 1 pick for radars is the Doppler, followed by the Maxwell. If you feel you could use that one extra energy point on something else, I would recommend any one of these radars here along with a radio. They don't cost any energy points, and the radio will transmit what you see on your radar to your teammates who are farther away from you. The last and final tip is to learn from your defeats and don't give up. One thing I like to do is to check out the stats page at the end of a match that I lost. If you happen to make it into the top 4 ranking, then you should be happy with your performance. On the other hand, if you ranked 5th or below, then chances are you were not as helpful to your team as you probably should have been, and try to analyze why that was the case. You can ask yourself, was I using the right weapons for this power score? Should I have been more aggressive or perhaps more defensive during that match? Was I running solo when I should have been supporting my team? Some games there is really nothing you can do to win the match. But just because you lose your weapons or you have little health left, you should always try to at least capture a base or try to take down an opponent by timing your self-destruct right when you meet them. Well, that will conclude this video on 10 tips for winning PvP battles. I really hope you benefited from some of these tips. If so, please drop a like and feel free to add some of your own tips that you might want to share in the comments below. Other than that, I'll see you here next time on Crossout Basics.